welcome to our Boss Fight Live illustration and packaging design. So I'm Meredith Franks. I run marketing for Boss Fight, and I have a whole host of folks with lots of experience that I'm going to introduce. So I'm going to start with Andrew, who is one of the partners and art directors at Boss Fight. Andrew, do you want to say a few words about your experience?
No.
All right. So I will say them for him then. So Andrew, as a partner, manages several of the toy lines, including Flash Gordon and Bucky O'Hare and Sam and Max and several others. Next up, we have Erica Henderson. So Erica is a freelancer with Boss Fight, and she's an amazing artist. So Erica, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I traditionally work more in comic books, but for Boss Fight, I did some of the packs packaging, like the Celestial 2-pack, and right now I'm doing the lunchbox and package art for the Flash Gordon movie designs.
All right, thanks, Erica, and thanks for joining us today. And next up, we have Lawson Wallace, who is another freelancer with us, and he is an illustrator extraordinaire. So Lawson, you want to share a little bit about your experience?
I went to the Joe Kubert School, and ever since I finished the Kubert School, I worked in role-playing illustration. I did licensing for DC Comics. I worked on Batman animated stuff, Superman animated stuff, etc. I did comic book work, comic book cover work. I do stuff for Boss Fight. Do a lot of the packaging art on their figures. And I did the Leonidas lunchbox, which I'm very proud of. And still doing stuff for you guys. So that's what I'm mostly doing these days, is just packaging work, it seems.
Well, we're going to use it for more than packaging, but yeah.
Yeah.
Might have multiple uses across many platforms.
And with that, I will introduce Dave Reeves, who is the creative director at Boss Fight and a lovely human being and manages all of the work that we do. So Dave, why don't you share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, okay. Like Meredith said, I'm the creative director, and I manage all the creative that comes out of Boss Fight: photography, illustrations, packaging, merchandising, ads, you name it. Got my start doing very boring stuff like menus and business cards and trade ads for surge protectors. But after a layoff, I got lucky enough to get placed at Hasbro as a temp. Eventually worked my way up to being hired and got placed on Star Wars, where I had the pleasure of meeting Andrew and another one of our partners, Eric, and one of our other employees, our painter extraordinaire, Eric. But that's where my career really took off in this industry, was when I got placed at Hasbro. I worked on Star Wars for nearly 10 years, but also worked on other brands like G.I. Joe for a short period, and Creo, the construction brand. After Hasbro, I get laid off in 2013 at Hasbro after a big company-wide layoff that some of my friends were also a part of. I got called by a former Hasbro colleague to come be his creative director at a group called Toy State, which made remote-controlled cars and trucks, drones, vehicle-based stuff. So that was a bit of a departure from Hasbro. I worked there till 2018 when they went out of business completely and shut down. However, luckily for me, I had been freelancing for Boss Fight. And when Toy State closed, I continued working for Boss Fight in a freelance capacity until I got hired in April 2019. And I've been there ever since, and I'm thrilled being part of this team.
And we love having you, Dave. So as you guys can see, we have a really experienced panel today, lots of experts here. We are happy to answer your toy packaging and illustration questions. So go ahead and type them in as we go. We'll get to as many as we can. But ahead of time, we got lots of emails from folks with questions. And one of the themes that we saw was a lot of people just asking about the process that you guys use when you're approaching an illustration for toy packaging or something like a lunchbox package, and how you work through that process. So Lawson, maybe you could go first and kind of share your general process you take as you approach a new project.
It really depends on what kind of project. I mean, obviously you prepare things differently for comics than you would for, say, packaging art. But what I normally do is, in terms of like with comic work, I'll read what's in the script and then I'll get an idea of what I need to do in a panel layout. But with packaging for a boss fight, generally what I try to do is to come up with an idea that will look good for the art, and it has a lot of energy, depth, says what needs to be said about the product, and try to land that with the best dismount possible. And so what I usually have is an image in my head that I work towards. I don't always do thumbnails, but I always do roughs. I always do some sort of rough thing, and a lot of times it only takes one rough. In the old days, it used to take several to do things, but I have a pretty good idea of what I want most of the time. So what I will start to work on first is, because of the process that that you guys need, is I always try to work out the figure first. The background, I can fit, that just about any way. But first of all, I want the figure to be dynamic. I want it to be interesting to look at, and I want it to put the character in the best light. So in terms of something like Flash Gordon, I really wanted that stoic, heroic figure to come through. I really wanted you to see that this is a man who's determined and he's on a mission. And with something like Ming the Merciless, I really just wanted to show off that Ming was this regal type that was completely full of himself and in love with himself and thinks of himself as a glorious, ruler of the entire planet, pompous, overconfident. I wanted all those things to come out in his figure. And so his pose should represent that. He's holding his sword it's almost like he's waiting for the camera guy to pull the bulb kind of thing, and do the flash, because he's, it's almost like a PR thing for him. He's like, I'm Ming the Merciless, the great, wonderful, magnificent ruler. And I wanted that to come out, that to come out in him, because that says who he is. And with Flash Gordon, who he is this character who is determined to overcome Ming's evil empire in any way he can. So I really want that to come through. And if I'm doing something like the Phantom, he's a man of action, so I wanted to show that. I always try to think about what I'm doing when I'm drawing, not just drawing a superhero pose or something that's sort of a stock image, but try to actually do something that has the character in it, that conveys to the audience that this is what this is.
Awesome. Thanks, Lawson. And Erica, I know you probably have a lot to add here. You've worked with a lot of the different brands, on Hacks and Flash Gordon and others. So what's your process like as you bring one of these iconic characters and you start the process?
Parts of it are similar because, you're basically trying to get across in one image exactly who this character is, even with the ones that aren't based on a pre-existing character like the Hacks. You still want to get across, this is what this Medusa is like. This is the sort of feeling you want to get across. But I'll focus a little more on the Flash Gordon stuff, because that's where it gets a little bit different. Because with the movie, you're not just trying to get across, this is Flash Gordon. You want to get across, this is Sam J. Jones as Flash Gordon. And so there's this element of portraiture and trying to make sure that you're selling the fact that this is this version of the character. So there's a lot of trying to get that right, but also trying not to just draw exactly a scene from the movie, because at that point you may as well just get a glossy and put that down and not hire anyone at all. You want the energy that comes from it being a piece of art and feeling like it's special for this, while trying to get across that it's from this other thing, which has a very specific feel. And, there's just a lot of making sure that that comes across right, and that also leads into the part of the process where you have to go back and forth with whoever owns the likeness rights to those people. And I've had to, it's actually been pretty easy with this, but I've had some projects where actors have come back and be like, gotta get better looking, you gotta make me look good. This is not, I'm not pretty enough here. So we haven't had that, I don't think. You know, just, but that's a major part of it, is now you're making sure that not only are you getting this across, you have to make someone happy who you're literally drawing. That can get tricky, especially if you're going into characters that like aren't necessarily depicted in the best way, but you still have to make a real life person happy. Which I'm sure when we get down to it, like Max van Sydow's cool. I'm sure he's down with whatever. But yeah, it's like it's melding everything Austin just said about getting the poses down, making sure the pose works within like this specific frame that you have, which also has the title going over it over here. And so you have like this L shape that you want to fill up because no one cares about the background. That's not what they're buying this toy for.
Yeah, no, you're right.
So it's a weird composition you have to think of, while keeping the character looking cool over here, because in the packaging, there probably is going to be standing up straight because you want to keep everything nice and tidy, and contending with everything else that's in your way that you know is going to get stamped on top.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Erica. And Andrew, as you're thinking through some of your projects and kind of conceptualizing what you want before you give direction on the packaging, you know, how do you think about the toy being there physically along with all the other illustration elements?
Well, I mean, the primary purpose of a package illustration for an action figure is to bring the character to life in a way that a static toy in a package, no matter how good it looks, can. You know, I think it's important to show that character in a dramatic pose, and as the guys were talking about, in something that says something about their personality. And also you want to try to showcase, you know, a feature of the toy. So, you know, not just getting the costume details right and the likeness right, but you want to make sure you're showing off a key accessory or something like that. You know, that's sort of all the things that we're looking for when we kick off a new illustration project. And I guess also we try not to be too overbearing on our freelancers. So let them sort of stretch and create within the bounds that they're working in.
Agreed. Absolutely. You can't dictate creativity. You know, you just gotta give the illustrators and the freelancers their parameters and see how they can bust beyond it.
I mean, this is not what we're talking about, but just think about those amazing Masters of the Universe paintings that were 1,000 times cooler than the toys could ever be. No matter how cool they were, there was just like this crazy battle going on next to the toy.
I kind of see it. I mean, this is the way it is with comics too. It's a team effort. Like a lot of times I've had to deal a lot with Dave and Eric before that, and just recently with Andrew. But I really feel like, you know, they have my back on something. If something isn't, you know, if something's too big or you know, something is too small, they will blow things up. They will move things around to fit that image better than even what I originally planned sometimes. And Dave's done that. You know, and just that's the great thing. It is kind of a team effort that, you know, it's good to know that if, you know, if I'll put a suggestion, because that's how I look at it. So this is my background suggestion. This is how I kind of see it. But I let, you know, at the end of the day, I'm gonna let Dave or Andrew make that decision on what they want with it, because I think it'll work. You know, I try to design it so it'll work with more than just one element, especially the background, because there's two images for the packaging. There's also a smaller image on the back that gets done. So, you know, the figures have to be moved around a little bit. It's kind of different from just doing a static illustration in that regard. And yeah, just like Erica said, you have to deal with the fact that there's logo placement and things like that in the format, and you never know. Like, I don't know what the future will hold on another piece. They might want to change something around in the packaging design. I have to kind of be a little bit flexible and allow that. Maybe, well, what if they want to put a burst here that says, oh, by the way, there's just something special in here or something. I've got to allow for a little room that way. So it's good. It's a real team effort. And I really enjoy it, something different.
You're right, Austin. It is a team effort. And, you know, like you said, there's the hacks cards. Where the front, we have the L shape like Erica discussed, but on the back, there's a more rectangular box. It's pretty straightforward. But, you know, I might also use your artwork for a magazine ad, or I might use it in a larger format somewhere, like a poster or at a trade show on a wall. You know, so the flexibility that you guys provide me is incredible, and allows me to use that art for more than just packaging, but anything.
And I think we've started to allude here to kind of some of the elements that go into toy packaging. So Dave, maybe you could start talking through what are all of those elements, and how do you really bring them all together?
Yeah, well, these guys have each touched on it a little bit, but yeah, I can help bring it together here. The artwork, what Erica and Lawson were talking about before, sell the fantasy is what I was taught when I first started working in the toy industry by a respected man that I used to work with. What the art should do is not only sell the toy, but sell the fantasy of what you can do with that toy, and harken back to the property or the fantasy that you know, whether it be the, you know, Greek medieval characters or Flash Gordon, that this illustration, this artwork is really dynamic and eye-catching, and really brings you back to that moment when you first met that character or saw that scene or saw that movie or anything like that. Andrew also mentioned that, you know, you get the static pose of the figure on the packed out in the blister on the front. On the back is where we really need to have some fun with that figure and do some great photography, not only to support that fantasy again, like on the front, but also to show their features, what they do, what they come with, what they're capable of doing. You're only going to see that static blister coffin on the front, so we want to pose characters out and putting them in fun environments and showing them with their weapons and what they can do and all that fun, great stuff. But around that, you know, we have the branding, and each brand has its own unique challenges and limitations and freedoms, of course, whether they're licensed or not. So they're licensed or our own properties. But the branding always has to be bold and eye-catching and descriptive and clear and consistent from one brand to the next. So it's really, you know, clear and eye-catching to the consumer, the differences between our brands and sub-brands and properties within those brands. And then structurally, we also look for unique ways to package and showcase our products. And we love working on unique structures and coming up with unique things and fun ways to showcase our stuff. The lunch boxes, blister cards, window boxes, you know, window boxes that come together to make one unique scene. You know, there's a lot of fun stuff that we can do with the packaging. But like I just said, and Andrew and Erica and Austin brought it out earlier, it all comes together in one big stew, and it's a team effort between photographers and illustrators and engineers and designers and graphic designers, and out it comes.
So something you mentioned, Dave, was like all the different types of packaging that we do. And if you're a fan of Boss Fight and you have multiple lines of ours, you see all the different types of packaging. So what are collectors really looking for, you know, as they're thinking about a toy that might sit in packaging on the shelf? How do we differentiate that and bring that to life?
One thing that some of us in the toy industry call our work is disposable art, because a lot of toy packaging gets ripped up and thrown away. However, there's the collector side of toy purchasing in the industry. So it's not disposable art to them, and it's not disposable art to the, you know, to the mom or dad who pulls it off the shelf, but eventually that happens. But the collectors want that cool art, that fun art, that unique to them art. Like Erica said, you know, if you're just going to put a glossy on there, what fun is that? We want to see something unique and a unique twist on a character and a unique spin and somebody's unique style. We use a whole host of different illustrators that each have their unique styles, and it's great, and it works for each brand. Structurally, one of the unique things that we do at Boss Fight with our hacks packaging that really plays to the collector is our packaging is resealable, so it doesn't get destroyed when you open it. The blister comes off, the card slides out, the coffin drops out, and it really appeals to the collector who likes to change their characters up. Today I'm going to have this head on it, but tomorrow I'm going to put the helmet on it, and I'm going to change the grips on the hands to, grabby hands to grip hands where I can put a weapon in it, and I might change the cloak out, or I might change another accessory out. Instead of having 1,000 lost pieces strewn about your house, you can put it right back into the blister, slide the card right back into the outer clamshell, pin it right back on your wall, or put it right back on your shelf with all the rest of your packaging. So we really love that we are able to afford collectors that functionality in our packaging.
It's a great feature. We had a question come in that I think is fantastic. Tony is asking, what kind of education or experience is necessary to get into toy illustration and packaging? So Andrew, what do you look for when you're starting to think about branching out to new artists?
It's interesting. I think there's a lot of discussions happening right now in art-related communities about what value schooling actually has. So, I don't want to speak to that. It's more important that someone can do the job, they demonstrate that they can do the work, and very important that they can do it professionally, on time, with plenty of communication, stuff like that. As far as background, it's just part of demonstrating those two things. So we might want to see your previous jobs and clients to know that you're professional and reliable, and that you can complete a variety of projects in a given time frame.
Awesome. And Lost and Erica, Dave, what kinds of backgrounds and education did you bring as you were entering into this world?
I was a film major, which tangentially related. It's the arts. But after school, I was in video games for a while. I bounced around there for a little bit, and then mainly have just been doing freelance comics and illustration work. Like, it's basically what Andrew said. It's like you just do the work, and as long as you can show that you can do the work, then that's really all there is. Like, I got the video game job out of school because I was able to talk to an art director, and they were hiring new grads, and then I was freelancing after work, and then that helped me when I was freelancing full time. And it's just, you just keep building and adding onto your portfolio, really. And no one's asked me if I have a degree. No one, generally when you're doing artwork, you really don't care, because if you went to school and you can't produce, doesn't help.
Nope. No, Erica, Lost, and I've worked with you both on several projects. We don't know our educational backgrounds. I don't care. Don't matter. No, the education, it provides the foundation.
Yeah.
To go off and work from, but there's nothing that replaces experience.
Nothing at all. And I have never, not once, had anybody ask me about what my background with art was. They only were interested in seeing a portfolio of my work.
Yep.
And if it was something that they looked at and they said, you know what, we can use this guy's work, then I got hired. And lucky for me, I've kept busy since '96. I have kept real busy with doing just everything, licensing. I started off doing role playing for 5 years. I did games like Deadlands and Star Wars and Indiana Jones and GURPS and Rollmaster and just every game you can think of. And I did dozens of books for each of them. And then I went to do license work at DC Comics. At a time when I went through the Joe Kubert School, it was when the comic industry was imploding. Okay, like '96, everything, Marvel was filing Chapter 11. Here ever since I was 4 years old, I wanted to be a comic book artist. And suddenly guys that had worked in the business 20 years couldn't find any work. So I did role playing because it was a good kind of relatable industry where you could do illustration work and do things that were very similar. And then I got work as doing licensing because, again, they're still putting out books and things, even though it wasn't comic books. You know, Batman the Animated Series was big, Justice League was big. I did Crypto the Superdog books for kids. I did Super Friends books for kids. I did movie tie-in books for like Superman Returns and Dark Knight. And I even did for Marvel Entertainment, I did like a Spider-Man 3 kids sound book, you know, where you push the little buttons and makes all the noises. And somebody asked me, so like, don't you regret not doing comic books? I'm like, well, I don't know. I just sold, 10 million units of this book opposed to, wow, what did the X-Men sell this month? You know what I mean? So I took solace in the idea that I was making kids happy. And some kid, first time they saw Wonder Woman, Batman, or Superman, it was mine. And that made me feel so good. And then I did comic work because I slowly started getting it back into comics when comics started picking up. And I would do something like Rocketeer Spirit, or I would do something like Mars Attacks books or the covers. And I would do Cave Woman or Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, and just sort of like bounce back and forth between kind of careers and still have fun to do all this. And now I got work with Boss Fight just because I was complaining to Eric on Facebook that, you guys need a Minotaur. And he recognized my name and asked me if I wanted to do some work. And, I have really enjoyed doing this. It's something completely different from what I've done in the past, but the skill set that I bring with it is very helpful to do this kind of work. And I really enjoy Boss Fight's products, and I was a fan of Boss Fight before I ever did any work for them. I had like 50 or 60 figures before I ever knew any of you guys, and I was just a fan. And I remember what you were talking about earlier. That's what got me. I think I bought the skeletons, and I was like, oh, these are really neat. Then I finally broke down and bought some of the hacks, and the cards slid out of the back, and I'm like, I don't have to rip this to pieces. I could put this back in, and I'd never seen anybody do that before. That honestly, I've been collecting action figures all my life, and that blew my mind. I know it's a little thing, but it just blew my mind. So I knew I was in a good place. But it is important to have a good education with art, but it's not necessary to get work. What you need is a portfolio.
There's one thing I want to add. And this is something that comes up a lot on the comic side, and I assume the opposite is true with you guys, where I've seen a lot of comics editors complain when they look at portfolios. There's someone who's like, I've always wanted to draw comics, here's my portfolio. And it's just a bunch of still images of Spider-Man. It's like, well, we need you to be able to tell that story with many images. Yes. Can you do that? I'm going to assume that with you guys, you need someone to be able to show they can tell a story with one image. And so it's all about, like, if you're doing a lot of stuff all the time, that's great, but also know who you're selling yourself to. And you put a portfolio together, make it for that person. So don't just have one portfolio if you're just bouncing around doing all this stuff.
And look at what people publish. Take a look at that, because when I went to get comic work, one of the things that I know that the editors were looking for to see if you could, see if an artist could handle their characters and not just do a bunch of pinup art. Because with sequential art, the idea is that you're going to be telling a story through a series of panels, and you need to show characters doing mundane things too, like drinking a cup of coffee or changing a tire or just walking or doing things that a lot of artists don't want to do. They want to do the fun stuff. They want to draw somebody, flying through the air or punching someone or shooting beams of light out of their hands, which that's all fun. But at the end of the day, they need somebody who can tell a story, and they need somebody who's well-rounded, that can draw cars, that can draw horses, that can draw people, that can draw, clothes on people, not just like, I drew a line across the waist. That's a shirt and that's pants. That doesn't work. That might have worked at one time in comics, but it doesn't work anymore. I think that the artists out there today have upped the ante quite a bit. And, it does pay to learn to draw things. I know, speaking for myself, having a background in role-playing illustration has helped me with boss fight stuff, because I have done that 1 second slice of life type of illustration that conveys the story. And that was very helpful to me. And it feels a lot like that, going back to the role-playing days when, I would have to draw. One of the things in role-playing books that I used to do, as well as just doing a scene, was they had these character archetypes. You could be a thief, or you could be a fighter, or whatever in D&D, but like in other things, you'd be like I'm a pirate or a rogue. And when you do a drawing for those archetypes, you want to convey character. You want to say what that character is about, what that archetype is about. You don't draw a warrior and he's sitting there looking all broken down going, I sure need something to read, because it doesn't work. I mean, that you might find a wizard that's like studying over books and, has carrying potions and things. And, but you've got to really plan stuff. But as far as artists going out and getting work, they really just need to make sure that their skills are good, and that they're presenting the best work that they have possible in their portfolios, and just do it. Go out there and find people. Go to cons, or go look at addresses, send work in. That's how you get work. You actually have to go look for it. It doesn't come to you.
Awesome. That's all great advice, guys. And Tony, I hope that gives you a little bit of insight into everybody's path is different. And there's lots of different ways to get to where you want to go. So we've been getting a ton of questions around boss fight specific products, and kind of how do you guys approach such iconic brands? Sometimes you're working with iconic people in the industry like Steve Purcell, Larry Hama, Sam Jones, when you're talking about the Flash movie. So let's address some of that and talk about how do you approach these relationships with these illustrations, knowing that you're also working with some of your icons and people that you might fanboy or fangirl over. So Erica, I know you mentioned early on, you've been working on the Flash Gordon Lunchbox. How did you approach that, and what was your process like with that artwork?
Part of it is just looking at the shapes you have to work with and what you need to do with that. So I feel like the more challenging part is that stripe along the edge, because you have, the top, which is going to have the handle on it, and the bottom, which should have something, but not anything that important, because you want to look good, but presumably you're not looking at the bottom too much. Then it's just have the corners, which should, again, have something, but should be even less important than the bottom, because it's all warped around the corners. And then images right here on the sides. So that was the first thing. Like the back is easy because that's a rectangular piece of art. That's like the shape that most art comes in, most flat art. So it's like, great, good. Just draw the main characters. We're golden. It was really just thinking about what can I put into this amount of space that will get across more of the movie and not look too crowded. Because you want to get as much as you can while also making sure everything's visible and what you put there feels important. You don't want to get everything in there and then have it all just be this weird mishmash that you either can't make out, or like you put in every Birdman and then, you've just lost the main characters. It's kind of about prioritizing. That's the main thing, because you know what the job is. Now you have to decide, like, which things do I want to put on here, and which things can you leave out because it's not important, and then what can I do to fill in these spaces that still need texture but aren't ideal for a primary image, like those rounded corners, which you don't want to leave blank, but you're not gonna put Timothy Dalton on a corner. Like that's not what you do to that kind of face.
Nobody puts Timothy Dalton in a corner.
No.
Well, thanks for that insight. And Lawson, you've mentioned that Flash is a favorite character of yours. Phantom is a favorite character of yours. You've kind of alluded to that early on. As you were approaching the illustrations for these packaging designs, how did you manage working with one of your favorite kind of iconic brands, and how did you approach that process?
Well, it's really easy. It's like working with an old friend, because I know them very well, and I know who they are as a character. I know what they're about. And I think when you deal with characters like Phantom and Flash Gordon, it is kind of a little bit of a weight on your shoulders, in the sense that some really amazing, talented people have worked on these characters in the past. I mean, Alex Raymond was one of the godfathers of comics. Comic strips, comics, everything. Alex Raymond was amazing. Al Williamson, Flash Gordon, right up there with Alex Raymond's. Those guys are, I don't know if they'll ever be surpassed doing Flash. But what you try to do is to do something that feels in that same vein as what they were trying to achieve with the character, that same kind of adventure strip kind of atmosphere, that action hero kind of thing that has that nice pulpy feel to it. And it still makes people excited when you see it. Like, oh, wow, that's cool. That's what you want out of that. And so when I draw those characters, I'm trying to think of what would make me happy if I was pulling this comic book up and I flipped it open, or if I saw this image in a book or on a packaging. I always try to think of that. Like, will it make me happy to see this? Will I be pleased to see a figure like this or a drawing like that? And I try to give... I do things to the best of my ability. I love putting foreshortening on figures, because it takes a certain amount of skill to really pull off dramatic foreshortening. And I like doing that because it's harder to draw. It pushes me to do better work. And if you, like I said before, if you land the dismount, it wows everybody. It makes everybody happy. You look at it and go, wow, that's cool. So when the Phantom's punching straight out at you and you think, oh, wow, it looks like he's actually punching the camera or something like that, it really makes a difference in the art. It adds an extra level to it. It adds a little extra impact visually. And I'm always looking for that. I'm always looking for something that will convey some energy in the piece. So when you look at it, you're like, oh, wow. It's not just some, just a posed look thing. It's something that grabs you and captures your imagination, and it's kind of like a window into the book, into the product, into the figure. So it's what Dave was saying earlier, and Andrew was saying earlier, that when you say have the static thing, no matter how good it is, it's not going to get you in the mindset of like, oh yeah, I really want that. But if you can see that image, you're suddenly saying, oh, wow, yeah, I can see myself posing this figure this way and do this action. It's like, for me, it's like going back to my childhood when I see that kind of thing. And when I was a kid, I mean, believe me, the original Star Wars figures did not look like any of the actors, but we bought them because we were able to dynamically imagine those scenes from the movie and do those things. And I think that's what I'm trying to achieve with the art when I do that, is to try to put people in that situation where they can see this happening. And that way they would want to get this product and say, you know what, I'm going to set my Phantom up with Hero, and I'm going to do a scene just like that. Because with boss fight stuff, you can. They're so articulate, you can.
So we have a lot of questions around Bucky O'Hare on here, lots of discussion. The packaging has a throwback feel to it, kind of harkening back to the original Toyline packaging. And Andrew, maybe you can share some color here on how do you balance creating something new and using some of that old feel to it, and making sure that you're still paying homage to the iconic packaging while imagining something new.
It's always sort of tricky to balance those old and new elements. We didn't want to straight up completely emulate the vintage Bucky O'Hare packaging. But what we did want to do is we wanted to look at sort of the most important few elements from that, that were part of the brand's identity, and make sure we bring those forward, well, giving it a bit of a fresh look. For Bucky O'Hare, it was the blue space field, it was the big bright logo, and it was the big character illustration. And so we carried those over, but we also introduced the elements of having the actual Michael Golden comic art incorporated in the package to give it some interest and say that these are, new and different and closer to the original comic. So it's how much new do you want? How much old do you want?
It's tough to modernize an existing brand and to make it contemporary, but yeah, like you said, Andrew, you use some of those classic elements that are easily recognizable and stand out to fans, while bringing in newer, modern, more elements like maybe it's a unique structure around the old school graphics, or a neat way to show the figure in the blister or the photography on the back. But yeah, it is a challenge to balance an old brand into modern times, and but we try to capture that personality well, and I think we do a little bit of both.
But one thing that you said early on, Dave, was how each brand has its own personality, and you're managing so many lines of brands right now. If you look at the Boss Fight portfolio, so how do you make sure that each individual personality is coming through in that packaging and illustration while you're jumping from Flash Gordon to Court of the Dead to Bucky O'Hare? Like, how do you transition that and maintain all of those iconic brands?
Well, I have multiple personalities, so it's easy. No, it is a challenge. We have a lot of different brands across a lot of different spectrums. I mean, we're talking comics and hero comics, movies, television, fantasy, children's novels, girls properties now. It is very challenging, and but it helps keep me and the rest of the gang really well-rounded. How do I do it? I don't know. I don't know. How do I switch gears from Court of the Dead to I Am Brilliance? Just push away, get up, go for a walk, come on back with a different mindset. But yeah, we do really have a lot of different properties, and I don't know how. It's just check in, check out, push away from the screen for a little bit.
We have a lot of questions around the hacks packaging and how do we bring the Greek, the fantasy, the steeds, the zombies, how do we have one coherent brand but still differentiate a little bit?
Hacks started with the Greek line and moved on to fantasy and into zombies, but now that we're adding those properties, we're trying to keep the heritage of what hacks is, and the theme of hacks is there are no limits, and the space speaks to that, to the infinity that hacks provides of creative options. But rolling that out into the hero versions, illustrative style is a little different. We're working with talented artists like Lost in America, some other great guys and girls as well, but each brand has its own uniqueness with the illustrative style, and we incorporate the branded logo as well into the front of the packaging, and as well as the coffin area. We're doing a little bit something different now than what we started with Greek and fantasy, and we started with zombies, putting in some elements from that brand into the coffin area, and on the back as well, starting to weave in maintaining the hacks brand and look, but adding lug-ons and add-ons that make it become hero and or steed. The steed packaging again is it's just an extension of the hacks figure scales, but a larger format is of course. But the hero and steed packaging has been a lot of fun, bringing in both elements of hacks and the hero brand.
So we've had a lot of people ask, what has been your favorite illustration you've worked on? So I'm going to come to each of you to answer that for packaging. And Lawson, maybe we'll start with you.
Well, I'm going to go for a sentimental favorite here. And I did a drawing of my wife before she was my wife at the Kubert School. and she posed for me, and I drew her face and with her engagement ring on her hand like this, and her parents still have it hanging on the wall. And we got married in '96, and so that is a sentimental favorite of mine. I forever reminded of just how lucky I was to go to the Kubert School at the time I did. But if I had to pick something professional, whatever the last thing I did, that's my favorite until the next one. That's right now.
Bing.
The Phantom and the Flash stuff, you know, yeah, that's my favorite right now. Next week it might change.
And Erica, how about with you? What's your favorite that you've worked on?
Trying to think. I'm looking around as if there's going to be an answer around here, but there isn't. I think it's probably with illustration, something that had to have happened early on that I was like so excited that I got this job, because it was like a new point in my career, and I'm not sure what that is right now. You know what was really cool? I did a bunch of illustrations for the remake of Are You Afraid of the Dark that were used in the show. Like the main character was an artist, and like her drawings came to life. And so it was cool to do this thing that was like, I watched as a kid, and to just kind of do what I do and just contribute to it, you know, in this way, and this, like doing what I normally do and having that be in the show, but also be a piece of the show. It was cool. It was really fun.
Awesome. Andrew, let's go to you. What's your favorite that you've worked on?
I think in terms of the packaging that I've been a part of, I think it's been the Sam and Max packaging. That Sam and Max was interesting because the characters are visually very exciting, but the brand hasn't really had any merchandise, so it didn't have a visual identity. So we had to imagine what that was, and then also because we had Steve on board to be very generous with his time in terms of illustration and comics for the packaging, you know, it was how big can we get these new images on here? So yeah, that's my favorite.
All right, Dave, coming to you. You've had some time to think about this question.
Yeah, and I'm struggling to come up with one because I have worked on thousands of packages and worked with some very, very talented artists. Whew. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. I've done lots of packs where you gotta collect all six, and all six come together and form one big scene, or multiple packs that link up and do the same thing. But I really like what we're doing now at Boss Fight, like Lawson and Erica were talking about before, like using the depth of the packaging and breaking frame and coming out now, like coming out in front of the logos and doing that engaging kind of stuff. But one package that I really loved working on structurally and artistically and graphically was the Carbonite Chamber package that I did for Star Wars for a Comic-Con exclusive. That was a beast, and a lot went into that package. And you know, there's 6 different illustrations for the 6 different movies in the franchise at that time, and wrapped around the big Carbonite chamber that we tried to recreate. I'd say that one for now today.
All right. Sounds awesome. I think for all of you who have been asking, I think you basically just asked everybody to pick their favorite child. So, but it's a fun exercise to walk through, kind of walk down memory lane.
It's too hard to pick one. It really is. You know, like the stuff that the current group at Boss Fight is doing is fantastic, and we're raising the bar every day. But some of the stuff that I've worked on in the past with Eric and Andrew at Hasbro and some of our, you know, internal illustrators at Toy State, it's hard to pick one. Each one gets better and better.
Yeah. So we had a question come in. How much traditional hand illustration do you guys use versus more electronic? So I think everybody's answer is going to differ a little bit, but maybe Lawson, you want to kick this off?
I work in traditional methods. So what this means is I do my work on paper, and I use a regular pencil, like the wooden kind, not a mechanical pencil. I'm old school, and I ink with a brush. I ink with super black India ink, and I ink it on the board. So there's original art every time I produce something. And then I scan it in and I send it off to a colorist. I have 3 great colorists that I work with. The first is Steve Downer. He's done the majority of stuff that I've done with Boss Fight, including the Flash Gordon, the Phantom stuff. I work with Matt Webb on the Skeleton Accessory Pack. And on the lunchbox, I worked with Nate Lovett, who did a fantastic job on that. So that's the process. Now, I also do some digital art. For the first time ever, the background in the Julie Walker Phantom, I did that completely digital. And I am trained to do digital work, but I usually like to do things traditional. And it's just because these are old world skill sets that you don't see used very often anymore. And if you're doing something like a classical feel, comic book feel like Flash Gordon or the Phantom, that's how they were done. And that helps, I think, people relate to that product in particular because they're seeing it done as it was done. And when they see that, but you know, even with the new digital coloring that wasn't done at that time, it kind of gives you the best of both worlds. You've got the old school aesthetic and the new school aesthetic working together in harmony, and that's always pleasant to see. And I think that that's what I tried to deliver, and my colorists certainly know what I am looking for. And I think you know, that's the methods I choose to work in.
I do a lot of doodling just on paper because I like just having that as my space to get out ideas. But then lately, all of my finished work has been digital. I like being able to make changes on the fly. I can just move stuff around however I want. Like a lot of times don't go in with a completely formal idea of what I want something to be finished. Like even once I have a rough approved, there's still details that aren't in the rough that I want to play with, and I don't 100% know what they are when I'm starting. And so I like having the freedom to just say, no, not that, and just get rid of it and put in something else.
Yeah, I doodle. I sketch too, but my sketching is poor. Ironically, I went to school to be an illustrator. And freshman year, they put me in front of a computer. And I have lost my chops, totally, completely. So, but, you know, when I have an idea for a layout or whatever, I'll sketch it out. But, you know, it's a circle and a triangle with a line through it, and that's a body. But yeah, I'll do some sketching, some doodling. Sometimes I'll be sitting in my living room and, you know, inspiration comes and you get up and you grab a napkin or a paper plate or something and just sketch it out. But from that point on, it's completely digital.
I've gone pretty much all digital for my design work. You know, it's a bit of a mixed bag, but I've just been using Photoshop for so long that it becomes as familiar as a more traditional method. And now I'm trying to teach myself Procreate. So we'll see how that does.
And I know we are coming up on time here, but I want to make sure that Lawson and Erica kind of get a chance to talk about what they're working on right now, kind of some of the cool stuff that's coming from them. So Erica, what are you working on right now?
Is there swearing in this?
No.
Okay. that question, you'll understand it in a moment. Andrew already knows. I have a book coming out on October 3rd called Dracula, Mother Effer. I'm sure you can figure out what that is. But that's a graphic novel I did with Alex DeCampi. It's a 70s horror noir blaxploitation kind of mashup, and it's a lot of fun. That's coming soon. And right now I'm doing rewrites on another graphic novel and just doing cover work here and there as it comes in. I've got a bunch of sketches to do after this is done.
And Lawson, how about you? What are you working on? What exciting things should people be on the lookout for?
Well, I'm right in the middle of doing the Phantom hero art right now, and Dave, you should be getting something extremely soon. Maybe this evening, maybe tomorrow. Awesome. So, but I just finished a cover for Heroes of the Golden Age, which is like a kind of a Marvel handbook for Golden Age characters that from the 40s and 50s, and I have tons of commissions and stuff that I always have lined up, and they re-released a book that I illustrated with author Micah Harris. It's called The Eldritch New Adventures of Becky Sharp, and it's just been re-released again. So that just came out, and I think that's available on Amazon. And other than that, it's just work as usual. I'll see what comes down the pike, but I've gotten promises of some cover work in the future too, so we'll see how that turns out.
Well, and as you mentioned the Phantom work you were doing, I saw an explosion of hearts on the screen, so everyone's real excited for that, Lawson.
I don't know. It's just, when I was a kid, I used to clip the Phantom strips out of the newspaper, and I followed it every day. I tell my dad, "You got to get a newspaper today, Dad." He's like, "Why?" I said, "Phantom." So yes, I love the Phantom. I have always loved that character, and just to be working on him, I feel very proud indeed.
Awesome.
Can't wait to see what you have for us.
All right. Well, we are at time, so I want to thank all of our panelists today: Lawson, Erica, Dave, Andrew. You guys added so much fun insight here. So thank you guys. And thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll make sure that this is available if you want to go back and review anything, or if you came in late and kind of want to see the beginning, we'll post the video as well. So thanks everyone for attending, and we hope to see you at our next Boss Fight Live event. Have a great weekend.